Sometimes, the world says no, not because you're wrong, but because you're early. This isn't the story of instant success or overnight fame. It's the story of fire, of rejection, grief, silence, and quiet resilience. It's the story of Alina Ray, the girl they laughed out of Shark Tank, who rose from her darkest hour to become a force the world couldn't ignore. She wasn't just rejected. She was humiliated. But she didn't stop. She turned every wound into wisdom, every scar into a seed, and every no into a deeper reason to rise. Alina grew up in a cramped one-bedroom flat in Newark, New Jersey. Her father worked night shifts in a hospital morgue. Her mother, a seamstress, stitched until her fingers ached and bled. They didn't have much, no vacations, no luxuries, but they had books. And dreams. Big ones. Alina was only 12 when she sold her first product, a hand-stitched tote bag made from leftover cloth her mother discarded. She sold it at school for $5. By the time she was 13, she had a spreadsheet. By 16, a basic website. At 18, a waiting list. But just as things seemed to be taking off, tragedy came knocking. In her first year of college, her father died suddenly from a silent heart attack. No signs. No goodbyes. Just a cold phone call on a rainy Tuesday morning. Alina didn't cry that night. She couldn't. Her grief didn't come with tears, it came with silence and long nights at her laptop. 12 straight hours coding. Some people mourn with breakdowns. Alina mourned through building. Every key she struck was a prayer. Every design, a way to stay connected to the man who taught her patience and pride. By age 25, her brand, Threadsole, was a modest but growing sustainable fashion company. Zero plastic. Fully ethical. Small margins, but pure heart. When she applied for Shark Tank, her hands trembled not because she needed the money, but because she needed to be seen. To be believed in. For a brief moment, she truly thought she would walk out with allies. But instead, they laughed. The room where she had poured out years of her life, her beliefs, and her hopes, mocked her in minutes. One shark leaned in with a smirk and said, "You're trying to sell guilt-free fashion to broke people. That's a contradiction." Another coldly added, "Your numbers are cute, but there's nothing proprietary here." A third simply shook his head and said, "You're passionate." But this isn't a passion contest. Alina didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just stood quietly, nodded once, and walked out of the studio with dignity. But the silence that followed was loud. The internet turned her into a joke. Memes. Mocking tweets. Headlines calling her the most delusional founder ever. What followed was a long and brutal descent. She lost 2 of her 3 employees. Her warehouse lease expired. She moved back into the bedroom she grew up in. The one that still held her father's books, and his jacket hanging quietly behind the door. Depression didn't announce itself loudly. It slipped in through the silence. For 6 months, Alina didn't touch her laptop. She didn't design, didn't sew, barely even spoke to her mother. The girl who once dreamed with spreadsheets and passion fell into a fog where even dreaming hurt. Then, one day, a letter arrived, handwritten, from a customer in Montana. It read, "Your tote bag carried my books through chemo. Your story kept me going. I hope you're okay. Please don't stop." That was the day Alina finally cried. The kind of deep, breaking cry that comes not from weakness, but from the soul finally deciding to breathe again. That letter was the spark. And sometimes, a single spark is enough. She rebuilt her website from scratch. Stripped down her offerings to just 3 core products, the soul tote, the legacy jacket, and the purpose scarf. She stopped trying to impress investors and started connecting with people. She told her story raw. No filters. No edits. She posted a simple TikTok, just her, sitting on the floor, telling how she was laughed off Shark Tank. It was shaky, honest, human. And it exploded. 4.3 million views. Orders poured in. Comments flooded her inbox, not from venture capitalists, but from people who had felt dismissed, underestimated, unseen. Investors did start calling. Big names. Big checks. But this time, she didn't take a dime. Instead, she launched a Kickstarter, Build ThreadSoul with me. She set a modest goal of $50,000. It crossed $2.1 million in 3 weeks. She hired 22 women, many single mothers and survivors, and opened a small production studio powered by people society often ignores. She offered paid training, childcare, and profit sharing. It wasn't just a company anymore. It was a community. A movement. A living heartbeat. And then came the full circle. 2 years later, Shark Tank invited her back. Not as a contestant, but as a guest shark. She was the youngest woman ever invited. The night before the taping, she didn't sleep. When she walked into that studio, every inch of her body remembered what it had felt like to be laughed at there. But this time, she sat in a different chair, the one with her name engraved in gold. During the taping, a young woman pitched a business eerily similar to what Alina had once built. Eco-friendly bags. Made by single mothers. Community-driven. The girl stood nervously, her hands trembling. Alina leaned forward. "I see the fire in your eyes," she said gently. "I've stood where you stand. I believe in you." All 5 sharks made offers. But the girl chose Alina. Today, Alina doesn't sell bags anymore. She sells belief. She owns 51% of the building where Shark Tank is filmed. Not for control, but for poetry. She turns the rooftop into a garden and named it after her father, Ray's Garden of Quiet Fire. Every month, she invites young dreamers there to sit under the stars, sip tea, and talk about building empires from ashes. Her story is no longer just hers. It's become a torch. A reminder that rejection is not the end, it's a redirection. That being laughed at doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes, it just means you're ahead of your time. So if you're sitting alone tonight, questioning your worth, doubting your path, remember this: Alina Ray was mocked, ridiculed, and left behind. But she kept building. Quietly. Boldly. And one day, the same people who laughed at her were forced to clap. Rejection is not your enemy. It is your fuel. Failure is not your grave. It is your fire. And who knows? Maybe the next shark they invite will be you.